August 2019. Mr. Psychopath was back. I was in a bad way and on a prescription of diazepam for anxiety, as I could not even function at this point. I spent a night in hospital after another severe bout of anxiety and mad thoughts. I was on my phone when I had a Facebook notification. I clicked and saw his name. I froze. I could not move. I should have ignored it, but the wounded child wanted to see what the message was saying, so I read it. I thought, like an idiot, it was a sign he'd come to save me from this hell that I had going on in my head. I was like, why now? Why has he messaged? It must be a sign, as I was in dire straits. Again, at this point, I did not know he'd been to prison, and the love bombing started again. I miss you. I haven't stopped thinking about you. And when he heard I'd moved to Ireland and I told him about my anxiety, he said he would move over and look after me. My first thought was, why would he want to move over here and give up his life? It is such a huge step. The truth was, he was sleeping on his auntie's sofa and he was desperate. He didn't want to move over. He had nowhere else to go. He had no home, no money, and saw me as an easy target. And due to my vulnerable state and ignoring the fireworks and bombs that my spirit guides were telling me and trying to warn me, that I was walking into the lion's den. And due to Mr. Psychopath already knowing that I didn't get put off by being called a slag, he knew that he didn't have to try as hard with me. Due to being in rural Ireland, the nearest shop was about 5 miles in the car. I was surrounded by fields with horses and cows, and I would love listening to the birds singing. What would be my safe haven of tranquility would soon become my worst nightmare, as being so rural left me vulnerable. Mr. Psychopath manipulated me to come over on the ferry to collect him and bring him back over. I left Dublin and got the fast ferry to Holyhead, and from there straight to Liverpool, which was not too far. I knew I shouldn't have gone. Every sense in my body was screaming, turn back, go home, but I chose not to listen. And once I reached Liverpool and picked Mr. Psychopath up, the anxiety had hit a level I cannot describe. I cannot stress enough that your gut instinct can save your life, so please listen to it. If something or someone feels off and you can't shake that uneasy feeling, listen to what your body is telling you. I had constant ringing in my ears. I know it was a warning, but once again I chose to ignore it. On the ferry back over that night, I first saw the first signs that he had issues. He had been drinking on the ferry, and due to his insecurities, as he called them, he accused me of looking at the barman. I laughed at this. I think it was nerves, but also because I was kind of shocked and outrageous. But he dragged me outside and grabbed me by my throat and said, "You're mine, and you don't ever look at another man." He quickly dropped his hands and began to apologise and said it was a drink. It was because he was jealous and because he thought he was not good enough for me, and every excuse you could think of he gave it to me, as I just stood there. I went out of my body, a trick I had learnt from early childhood abuse. I could hear his voice, muffled, but after a while I could not hear him. I was numb and knew once again that I was unlovable, and this is what I deserved. I didn't deserve love. I deserved this. I wasn't used to kindness. I was used to being abused. I was used to abuse. Mr. Psychopath knew this. He could tell. Predators always know. And once I re-entered my body, I knew I had finally succumbed to the years of abuse and trauma, and I just didn't care anymore. I did not care. Mr. Psychopath knew I'd lost a dear friend to suicide. He would use this against me. He would say he had a cluster B personality disorder like my friend and use it to manipulate me. I always said I would never turn my back on someone who needed me, and he played on that. My friend had borderline personality disorder, and he was a kind and beautiful soul, but he was troubled and could not deal with the blows that life had dealt him. But Mr. Psychopath was a psychopath with narcissistic personality disorder, with no emotions or feelings, a user, a drunk, a druggie, with no moral compass, no empathy, and devoid of all emotions. He had these green eyes that would turn black when he was drunk or about to go into a narcissistic rage. The drive back from Dublin to where we were living was a good 3-hour drive. He was laughing and joking like nothing had happened. We stopped for coffee, and as we stood outside, he looked at the stars and said, "One day I'm going to name a star after you, as you are my world." The constant switching of mood had me in fight or flight. But I thought I could fix him, fix the broken bits of him, so then I can fix the broken bits of me. It's really strange when I look back. Everything around me was telling me he was rotten. He had an evil presence, and once he moved into the home in Ireland, the house started to decline. I started to have mould in the bathroom, and in one of the bedrooms the wallpaper started to peel. Even the animals that surrounded the house stayed away. No more birds singing, no more horses and cows. They kept their distance. I started to lose contact with my friends. He finally got rid of my Facebook and now monitored my phone. I was only allowed close family friends, family, and a few female friends from back home in London and Liverpool, but nobody in Ireland. Because I couldn't really talk to my friends, after a while they stopped calling me, as he always answered my phone. I was not on social media. I had Snapchat, but he monitored that. Mr. Psychopath had begun drinking every day, smoking weed, and just getting more and more paranoid. The local shop was about 5 miles by car, but where we were living was farmland, so tractors and cows were common on the road. He would start to time me by going to the shops, and if I took longer than he thought I should, I would receive a beating. The first time it happened, I was not expecting it. I walked through the door and he just launches himself at me, dragged me to the bed, put his hands around my neck again and started to squeeze. I believe I went out of my body again, as I could hear him swearing at me, calling me names. And then I remember just turning and seeing him jump out the window. We lived in a bungalow, so he just jumped out and ran. I just lay there with this weird buzzing noise in my ear. I just lay there. That's all I remember. It seemed like minutes, but I think it was roughly about half an hour. But I was cold and I could not get warm, and my teeth kept chattering, and my jaw and my neck hurt. I decided to run myself a bath. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I refused to look at who and what I had become. But I didn't care. I literally did not care. The water was boiling. I could feel it burning my skin. But again, I did not care. I just didn't care anymore. A few hours later, I heard a car pull up, which was strange. I got up and looked out and saw a Gardaí car, which is an Irish police. They had found Mr. Psychopath stumbling drunk in the local village. I saw him sat in the car. He was laughing and joking with the officer that was sat in the passenger seat. An officer approached the house and he asked if I was okay, and went on to explain that Mr. Psychopath had been seen being thrown out the pub for trying to fight. He had been given a warning and they dropped him home. I don't remember much, apart from when they drove off, he kept saying, "Do you want to know why me and the copper were laughing? We were laughing at you." He wanted to know why I was with a fat, ugly girl when I'm so fit. I knew the police officer had not said that, but these were the things that he would say to me time and time again. He denied hurting me and said I attacked him first and it was self-defense, and I was cheating on him, and I was mad, and I had imagined everything. This was the gaslighting stage. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation and abuse used by abusers to hold power and control over their partners. By deliberately questioning facts, denying their partner's memories, and undermining their partner's judgment, they cause their partner to question their perceptions of reality and the validity of their thoughts and memories. This makes their partner feel like they're going crazy. The dark nights were drawing in now, and it was winter of 2019. This is my favourite time of year. I love winter and I loved Christmas, but this year I was dreading it. He had only been in Ireland a few months, but it felt like years. How could someone only be around for such a short space of time and cause so much heartache? Again, I just assumed I deserved it. I was unlovable, and this was the best I was going to get. I had brought some pumpkins and spent an afternoon crafting them to go on the doorstep. You don't get mischief night here, and the kids don't knock. And I've never really been into Halloween, but I'd seen some pumpkins and decided it would give me something to do, and I knew that my friends back home would be decorating theirs with their children, so I felt a little bit closer to them by knowing that they would be doing the same as me. He decided to spend the evening getting drunk in the garage, then picked up the pumpkins and smashed them on the ground, kicking them across the front garden. The abuse was happening daily now. He would accuse me of cheating, looking at men, and the abuse was just escalating. I would catch him watching me, trying to mimic emotions, or at least try to hide the fact he was evil. He knew I knew. I knew he knew I knew. It was like neither one of us cared to hide it anymore. My dog refused to be in the same room as him, so he would sit in the front room. He had his dog. She was a beautiful blue staff and was very protective of me. Once in a drunken rage, he set her upon me, but she bit him instead. That was kind of a wake-up call. Not enough for me to leave, but enough for me to start making a plan. I knew it wouldn't be simple to get away, but I started to get some things in order. So I decided to go to town. The nearest town was 20 miles away. And I knew that if I went, he would want to go with me. And he would go to the pub, get drunk, and beat me up after. It was the same story. Day after day, I would get accused of looking at someone, or he just knew I was talking to someone, so I'd get a slap. He had to defend his honour by being with a whore. So he had every right to be angry as I made him look like a mug. We got to town. He went straight to the pub. I brought a cheap phone and a SIM. I knew I couldn't leave the dogs for long, so I left him in town. I knew he would be angry, but I didn't care. Plus I knew he wouldn't leave the pub, so I drove home and started to pray. I prayed for forgiveness. I prayed to God to get me out of this mess. I prayed to my spirit guides to forgive me for ignoring them. But most of all, I prayed for everyone I had hurt by bringing in this evil monster into our home. When I got home, I charged the phone and put it where I kept my spare wheel in the car. I had a small bag which I hid in the garage, so I knew I had an escape plan. I knew it was going to get worse before it got better. The abusive text started about 8 hours after I left town. The usual, fat cunt, fat ugly slag, nobody wants you, I'm only with you until something better comes along. He told me he'd been fighting again, and I had to drive to pick him up, as if I didn't he'd be picked up by the police again. When I arrived, his shirt was ripped and had blood all over it. He turned and said to me, I fantasise about me and you going out and beating people up. I stifled a laugh. I actually thought to myself, he is mad. He's not just evil, he is actually mad. He kept rambling on, telling me he can't have sex with me because I'm so fat and ugly and I don't turn him on. I'd heard this so many times before, and the whole way home I just was expecting a punch or a slap, and just as I imagined it in my head, boom, he punches the side of my head and screamed, that's for looking at the man in the car. There was no car, it was dark, and the last car that passed us had long gone. I was trying not to cry, as I didn't want him to know that he'd hurt me. The tears rolled down my face. I had to pull over, as the lanes were dark, and I had this ringing in my ear from where he'd hit me, and it wouldn't stop. I just sat there and sobbed as he rained blow upon blow upon blow upon me, until he stopped when he was out of breath. He then started to laugh. It was like a cackle, deep from the depth of hell, and I finally understood that I was dealing with the devil. He then leant over and tried to hold me, saying he was sorry, he didn't mean it. And this was proof that he did love me, because if he didn't love me, then he wouldn't get angry about me looking at other men. Would a man hit a woman if he didn't care about her? Again, it was my fault for making him angry. The constant switching of severe mood swings from violent to apologetic to blaming was exhausting. When we got home, he went straight to bed. I waited till he fell asleep, and then I slept on the sofa with a knife under my pillow. I kept thinking, I have to leave, I have to leave. But then I was worried that he may hurt someone else. I knew what he was capable of. He gets off on violence. I actually convinced myself at this point I could save others by staying and not leaving. Christmas arrived, and he saw this as an opportunity to get drunk. But for the 2 days over Christmas, he never laid a finger on me. I think he was worried that people may pop in. New Year's Eve he spent crying, feeling sorry for himself. How awful his life was. How did he end up with the world's worst girlfriend? It had become a cycle of drunken abuse to physical, to the next day full of sorries, to I'm going to give up drinking. He would start a fitness plan and be nice, then he would start drinking again. A few times I managed to lock him out of the house and he slept in the car. I was so tired. I had one friend in the local village who knew something was wrong. She knew the signs and would drive past the house on the school run, and sometimes she would use the excuse of just passing to check in on me. She knew it was safe to come when she saw him in the village drunk. One day she came up, I told her everything, and she said everyone knew, as he was always threatening people, and some were scared of him, but people don't like to get involved. I felt a little stronger knowing I had someone in my corner, and then disaster struck. We went into lockdown.